folks, welcome in. It's another brand new edition of the 901 Soccer Podcast. It is probably the first or second one in a while where it's been just me. We've been fortunate enough to have several guests on over the last couple of episodes of the show, but thanks again for tuning in, even though it is just me. I'm your host. I'm Lawrence Dockery. You can find me on Twitter at LDoc93. You can find the 901 Soccer Podcast on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod. And because we here at the 901 Soccer Podcast are part of Bluff City Media, you can find Bluff City Media on Twitter at BluffCity_media. Of course, you can find us over on Facebook as well. Just search 901 Soccer or just search Bluff City Media and we'll pop right up both times. And of course, if you're watching this, as I hope that you are, you can like the video, comment on the video, and subscribe to the Bluff City Media channel. And there may actually be a little bit more YouTube channel discussion here in this episode, believe it or not. It may just be a crackpot theory of mine, but we'll see what happens. So, what I have for you tonight, this one is just going to be real short and sweet. It's been a minute since we've done a show, so I figured, better get back out there and do one. And what better subject to talk about than the only soccer that we in Memphis have left to support, and that is the women's and men's programs over at the University of Memphis. And they have just about finished wrapping up their spring season. And if you are like me, you did not know until very recently that spring college soccer was a thing. It's not to take away from the abilities or anything of the players or coaches or anything. That's not what I'm trying to do here, but it is essentially really just kind of exhibition games, scrimmages. I wouldn't go so far as to call them scrimmages. More exhibition games, I think, is probably a more accurate and fair representation of spring college soccer. That's not to say the players aren't trying. That's not to say that the coaches aren't working. That's not to say that to disparage anybody in any way. But there's no conference title on the line. There's no national title on the line. There's not a berth in the College Cup. There's no. They don't even use 4-man referee crews. They have 3-person referee crews. There's a little bit of flexibility. Scheduling can be a little bit wonky, and but all that being said, I was fortunate enough to be able to get out to 3 of their games this year, 2 for the women, 1 for the men. We'll talk about in a second. With it just being spring games, the scores are not really important. I did have somebody in somewhere on Twitter or Reddit or Slack or Discord or Lord knows, there's a lot of apps now. Somewhere, somebody in one of these apps was very upset that they didn't publish the scores for these games and said, well, I was going to go until I found out they didn't publish the scores. I'm like, well, it seems to me that the best way to figure out what the score was would be to be at the game supporting the team that you purport to, of the university that you purport to be a fan of. So that was very strange to me that somebody would get so mad about something like that. But, it is 2025 and everybody just wants to be mad about everything. That seems to be the default setting for whatever reason. Far be it from me to cast aspersions. That I've been mad about a lot of things in my life. But anyway, we're talking about happier things now. So the women's team obviously has been flying the banner for soccer at the U of M for some time. And Coach Mulrooney does have the men's team on an impressive upward trajectory, but there has not, in the history of the 2 programs, there has not been as much success on the men's side, nor has it been as consistent as what Brooks Monaghan has done with women's team. So they take point. They had 3 home games out at the Billy Murphy Track and Soccer Stadium. And that reminds me of one extra little topic. Let me just write it down so I don't forget it. They had 3 home games. They played against the Toronto Blizzard, who I had never heard of until they announced it. They played at home against Arkansas State, and they played at home against Ole Miss. When you look at the game against the Toronto Blizzard, this was one where one of the things that the U of M women's team is really, on top of the success that they've had as a program, all the conference titles, all the NCAA tournament appearances, the number of players that they have playing professionally now, not just in the NWSL or in Canada, but Moma Nakao just signed with Celtic in Scotland, and Sarah Hogg just signed with Valencia in Spain. Um, a former Tiger whose name escapes me just got called up by the Canadian women's national team, who is, probably the second best team in CONCACAF behind the U.S. women's national team, obviously. But that right there, called up by the Canadian women's national team. So you look at the roster, and one of the things that they're very well known for is the number of Canadian players that they have on the roster. So then you look, and they're playing a team called the Toronto Blizzard, and I don't know if you put 2 and 2 and get 4. I think it's more of a case of the dots are there. It's just up to you to connect them. My brain took me to possible scouting opportunity, and whatever ever you are able to glean from that, glean it and see if there's anybody that is interested in coming to play for the Tigers. It's a pipeline that seems to have been very successful and very fruitful for a very good number of years now. And I certainly hope that doesn't dry up, and I don't have any reason to suspect that it will. As long as Brooks Monaghan is the coach at the University of Memphis, I would expect there to continue to be a nice pipeline of Canadian talent coming down from the Great White North. So you have a home game against the Toronto Blizzard. I was able to be there for that one. They had a home game against Arkansas State. I was able to be there for that one. And they had a home game against Ole Miss. Unfortunately, I was not able to be at that one. And that's the one that I would really have liked to have been at, because think about it. It's Memphis, Ole Miss. Even if you are not a Tigers soccer fan, you are just a Tigers fan. You see Memphis v. Ole Miss on a schedule, that's one that piques your interest. Again, it is just spring soccer, so no, there were not 3,000 people out there this past Saturday at the track and soccer stadium. But based on some text conversations I had, it was the best crowd of the spring, and that's to be expected. You're playing Ole Miss. That's a team that here locally will move the needle. A, because Memphis fans want to beat Ole Miss, and B, because there's lots of Ole Miss fans here in this area already. The Arkansas State game that I was able to be at was a good game, I would say. It was got a little bit scrappy sometimes. Somebody from Arkansas State came over, and we were chatting for a minute during the game, and apparently that's one that the folks over there in Jonesboro tend to have circled, because a number of the players for Arkansas State are originally from the Memphis area, and that was something that I found very interesting. And you can certainly imagine that's a topic that is evergreen in every sport everywhere in the world, is when you're from an area and you don't end up playing for the team from that area, and you go somewhere else when you play for the team elsewhere, and they come back to play the team from the area that you're from. There's just a little bit extra motivation there, and despite it just being spring soccer. So it was a well fought game. It was I would say it was probably a pretty entertaining game, I would say. But it is just spring soccer. And I know that sounds bad to say it that way, but it's a long off season, and it's a really good way for the players to refamiliarize themselves with each other. With the way the transfer portal is now, fortunately, the Tigers women's program did not get gutted the way that the men's team did last year. I guess we can touch on that in a minute. But like I said, in the spring, there's no college cup berth on the line. You're not trying to make the NCAA tournament. No conference title up for grabs. But I made the point on social media that just because none of that was available, that's no reason for you to not get out and support the Tigers. And the two, what I'll say about the crowds for the games that I was at, they were not packing the joint out by any stretch of the imagination, but I was pleasantly surprised. In my mind, I'm thinking spring soccer, it's not the quote unquote real season, so there's not going to be anybody there. I was fully expecting to be able to sit there and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's everybody. That was not the case. There were a few more than that. there were enough more people. That doesn't even flow grammatically correctly, but whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. There were enough people there that it got to a point where I was trying to count and lost interest in counting the number of people that were there. So not like the Memphis Americans games where I could get to 37 and stop. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. Uh, Not just on the women's side, but on the men's side as well. I did get to one men's game, and that was against CBU. And so, understandably, that's two teams from Memphis. So there's going to be more people. I wouldn't necessarily call it a rivalry game, but that was you want to talk about Arkansas State having that spring game against the women's team circled. I think it's a safe bet to say that CBU had this one circled too. That was a very good game. That was a fun game to watch. If every regular season game played out the way that one played out, I think there would be a lot more people that would get hooked on Tiger soccer, because that was a very fun time to be at a Tiger soccer game. Again, score is not important, but they did have 4 or 5 home games. The men's team did. Unfortunately, I was only able to make it to one of them, which was the CBU game, but that is the one you would like to make it to because it is two teams from Memphis. And then, unfortunately, I was unable to get to the CBU game against Rhodes last week. But I do wonder, now that we no longer have Memphis 901 FC, if that does open up the availability for me to be able to get out and maybe cover a CBU game or two as well. They did win the Gulf South Conference Championship in 2022. So there's a recent history. There is a history of some level of recent success over at CBU. So if you are a CBU alum looking to get behind a soccer team, because the World Cup's coming to the U.S. next year, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm gonna hammer this to death for the next year and a half. So just get ready, and just brace yourself for it. Resign yourself to the fact that basically every show we're going to do here on the 901 Soccer podcast until August of 2026, some way, shape, or form, I'm going to be talking about the World Cup coming here next year. The number of soccer people that I know just this past weekend that were surprised to find out that the World Cup is going to be in the U.S. next year, it's actually quite alarming. And these are the soccer people. Forget the non-soccer people. Right now, I got to figure out a way to get the soccer people fired up for the World Cup. Because if you can't get the soccer people fired up for the World Cup, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that the non-soccer people are getting fired up for the World Cup. Different topic for a different day. But the Memphis men's game against CBU you would not have known if you had just been dropped down into the stands that night, didn't know anything about regular season versus spring season, CBU in this conference, the U of M at this level. You just dropped down and said 2 soccer teams playing. You would not have known that was a spring soccer game. You would have thought that was a regular season games with 2 teams, like a rivalry game going at it. I was very impressed with the energy that both teams brought. Both Coach Mulrooney's guys for the U of M and Coach Crean's guys for the Bucks at CBU. That wasn't the only men's team game. They had 5 of them: Southwest Christian, Cumberland, CBU, Union University, and Montevallo. So their spring season is done. I forgot to mention, we're recording this on a Monday night. The U of M women's team does still have 1 game left. It's on the road at UT Martin. I also forgot to mention, you might have seen it on the scroll, but they did play 2 road games as well. The men's team's games were all at home. The women's teams did play 2 games on the road against SEC opponents at Mississippi State and at Ole Miss. So they essentially had a spring home and home with Ole Miss, which I thought was just a little bit amusing. But I do hope that those are games that they can get on the schedule in the regular season in years going forward. Again, because even if you're a Tiger fan that's not a soccer fan, those are games that are going to move the needle because it's against Ole Miss, Mississippi State, teams that you are familiar with in this area if you follow the Tigers at all. Also worth noting that Mississippi State women's soccer just last year went to the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament. Sweet 16 or Elite Eight. They were a number one seed in the tournament and hosted all the way up to the point that they got knocked out by Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken. And every crowd that they got all year last year was bigger than the last crowd they got. I swear, every time I was scrolling through Twitter and some Mississippi State women's soccer tweet came across the timeline, it was new record attendance, and they were getting up to like 3,500 people or so. Like they were outdrawing 901 FC. May they rest in peace. But the women's team, so they did have 2 road games already. They have one more on the road at UT Martin on the 17th. And that's, I don't know if that's one that would normally be on the schedule or not, but UT Martin was supposed to come here during the regular season last year, and that game got rained out. And it does make you wonder, that was probably going to be a surefire win for the Tigers, for Coach Monaghan's team. And you do have to wonder if that in any way, shape, or form would have helped maybe get them an at-large bid for the NCAA tournament last year. By itself, probably not, but an extra win on the schedule is never going to hurt. But the men's team, they're done for the spring. They last year got gutted in the transfer portal. Gutted so bad that when I was watching the College Cup championship, the national title game, the College Cup final between Marshall and Vermont, Lineker Rodriguez dos Santos for Marshall was putting on a show in an ultimately futile effort. And that was almost like a little knife in the side, because he was really good for the Tigers when they went to the tournament in 22 and 23. And they did okay this year. They started out rough, but when you had 19 new guys on the team, that's going to take a minute to try to figure everybody out. And they had a rough start, and they got it figured out in conference play, won the AAC regular season title, ultimately did not win the conference tournament like they needed to, and missed out on a 3rd straight NCAA tournament. But like I said, Coach Maroney, you want to talk about trending upward, because I think prior to as recently as 2021, they only had 2 NCAA tournament appearances ever, and then they went back to back. And so it was probably a pretty tall task to make it 3 in a row, to do something that they'd never done before. But you at least have the feather in your cap of, we won an AAC regular season title. And that's something that I think we can talk about here in a second, about how the 2 programs can promote themselves going forward. So you can see it right there on the bottom. This is what it's all going to come back to. Because we no longer have, that's my mistake. We no longer have a professional team here in Memphis. Memphis 901 FC has gone through their fault, through my fault, through the fault of the state legislators, the city council, the NBA team in town, whoever. They're gone now. And I'm still grieving, and I still miss them, and I still see a lot of USL action on the timeline. And it's like, man, I should be down at AutoZone Park right now. But how do we grow the support for Tiger soccer? Because if there's soccer played in the city, I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that it's covered. Okay. And there were times during the 901 FC run where I didn't necessarily do that to the best of my ability. I apologize. But we have 2 fairly successful, I would say, programs, a women's team and a men's team at the University of Memphis, that have been very good the last 3 years, and the women's team for much longer before that. I would encourage everybody that is now a displaced, homeless, forgotten, forlorn, whatever you want to call yourself as a former Memphis 901 FC fan, if you're a Memphian and you supported 901 FC and you are looking for something to do with your soccer support, I would encourage you to go support the programs at the University of Memphis. The games are free. You don't have to pay the park. You don't have to buy a ticket. It's right there at Park and Get Well. It's probably pretty easy to get to from just about anywhere in town. You don't have to go all the way downtown. You're not going from Bartlett to downtown. You're not going from Collierville to Millington. It's kind of right there in the middle. Much easier to get to, even for me. It's just a straight shot for me. So you don't have to pay to park. You don't have to buy a ticket. During the regular season, concessions are available underneath the baseball stadium. They were not at the games. Oh, excuse me. Concessions were not available at the spring games, but they are at regular season games, and they do sell alcohol for those of you who that's your thing. And not that I am disparaging anybody. It's just that used to be my thing, and it's not my thing anymore. So, but if it is, that option is available to you. And the concessions, I would say, are fairly reasonably priced. I think the last time I got something there, I got a hot dog, a bag of chips, a Gatorade, and a candy bar, and I think it came to like $13 maybe, which, you know, you can't go to an event at FedEx Forum and pay $13 for one item, let alone four. So I would encourage people to go to the games and support the Tigers in that way. The support for the women's team the last several years has been very good. I don't know how they go about tracking the attendance. That's something that maybe I could try to get to the bottom of. You know me, I'm the attendance guy. Speaking of which, I have a piece up on the Bluff City Media website, which you should definitely go check out. It has the ranking of every single American soccer club and their average attendance. So that's MLS, that's NWSL, that's USL Championship, and that's USL League One. I tried to do a little bit of League Two, NPSL, NISA, digging around, and I didn't have the time or the wherewithal or the bandwidth to really do that the way it needed to be done. If there's somebody else out there that is even more of a sicko than I am, more power to you. But speaking of attendance, check that out over at Bluff City Media. But I would like to see bigger crowds for the men's games at the University of Memphis. I'd like to see bigger crowds for the women's games too, but they are the bigger of the two, and we're trying to lift them both up. But I would say if you can only get to one, if you can only make it to the women's game, go to the women's game. If you can only make it to the men's games, go to the men's games. If you can do both, do both. Again, you don't have to pay to park, you don't have to buy a ticket. It's all you have to do is show up. That's literally all you have to do is show up. And support them, because those are programs that are successful and that deserve your support. And if you're a soccer fan in Memphis that no longer has a professional team to support, I would direct you over to the programs at the University of Memphis. One thing I would also ask people to do, and this is a conversation that I had at one of the games that I was at this year with somebody in the athletic department. I don't know how much of a difference it makes. I was told that they would appreciate it if more people did this. I can't imagine it's going to result in a level of funding on par with the basketball program or the football program, nor should it. But one thing, there was a week stretch at work at my job where I was the only person in the office, and I did all of my tasks, and I got really, 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 really bored. And so I went to the YouTube channel for Memphis Tigers Athletics. And if you go, they have a little option to click on that says playlists, and they have a playlist of every women's soccer video that they've ever uploaded and a playlist for every men's soccer video that they've ever uploaded, and these go back 15 years. So I just went through all of them and let them play and let them rack up the views and made sure to like on every video, which I would encourage you to do here for the 901 Soccer Podcast on Bluff City Media. If you haven't liked, comment, and subscribed, please do so. And if there's other episodes of the 901 Soccer Podcast that you haven't seen, including an interview we did in January with Tab Ramos, which you should go check out, I would please do it for Bluff City Media, but also let's do it for the men's and women's soccer programs at the University of Memphis. That's a conversation that went something like, I don't know how much it really matters, but we definitely appreciate any and all views. So I would direct you to do that. Right now, this is at 9:49 p.m. on April the 14th. The playlist combined, all views on all their videos, is about 3,500 views. So I'm asking you, as the soccer fans in Memphis, to, by the time the regular season rolls around in August, to get that playlist view count up to 4,000. I've done my part. I would ask you all to do the same. And it doesn't really take a lot. Again, it's not something you don't have to pay to do it. All you have to do, you're already sitting at your computer, just pull it up and click and let it go. And then like the videos. The men's soccer video, obviously, they haven't been as successful. So there's fewer videos, which means fewer views. They're at 1,800 total, give or take. It's like 1857 or something like that. But I like round numbers. Let's get that up to 2,000 by the time that the regular season starts. And that's just something. Go to the games, watch their content on YouTube, like and comment and all of that. And please do the same here at Bluff City Media. And follow them on socials. I was surprised at how, maybe it's just because I exist in a soccer bubble, and I see them active as they are on social media. I was surprised that they didn't have as many as I thought that they did. So follow them on socials, support the YouTube channels, go to the games. Now, the next step, once we have grown support for Tiger Soccer, how do we translate that support? How do the Tigers then turn around and translate the support into capitalizing on the 26th World Cup being played here in the U.S.? It all comes down to promotion and marketing, which is something that just about everybody in this town not named the Grizzlies struggles to do. See Memphis 901 FC, but also see Tiger football, Tiger men's basketball. I think the only program over at the University of Memphis who's having a good year ticket-wise is the baseball team, because their season ticket sales are up 35%, if I'm not mistaken. But, that's a small baseball stadium, so we're probably, actual numbers-wise, I don't know what those actual numbers are, but a 35% jump is still nice. I'm trying to think how I want to put this. There's an episode here on the podcast that we did, I think back in January, with Simon Evans, and the crux of that podcast was, if you are in a place, in a city or a state where there are no World Cup games, and for those of you that don't remember, the 11 U.S. World Cup host cities are Seattle, San Francisco, L.A., Dallas, Houston, Kansas City, Miami, Atlanta, Philly, New York, and Boston. So if you're somewhere like Omaha, Nebraska, or New Orleans, Louisiana, Boise, Idaho, or Memphis, Tennessee, how do you capitalize on the World Cup? Because we keep hearing about how it's going to be a generational, transformational, rocket fuel, whatever awesome adjective or adverb that you want to throw at it, and how it's going to be transformational for the game here in the U.S. And I think it will be, but I think I know where we need to get. I just don't know how we need to get there. So that was the context of that podcast. And there was also a podcast that we did here on Bluff City Media back in November with Kenny Stubblefield about, are the soccer programs at the U of M the perfect way to get non-soccer people into watching soccer? And that's a podcast that I would definitely, I don't want to rehash that right now, because that was a very long discussion. So I would go back and check that out. It's a very good episode. It's probably one of the best we've ever done here. I would definitely recommend that you go check that out and see if our premise holds water. I think it does, but I exist in the soccer bubble. So how does the University of Memphis, how do Brooks Monaghan's and Richard Mulrooney's teams capitalize on a World Cup being played in the U.S. in 2026? One of the things that I think could be beneficial, and I don't know logistically how this would work, but we touched on it with the women's team on the international makeup of the team. They got a lot of players from Canada on that team. Canada is one of the hosts, one of the three co-hosts of the 2026 World Cup. I wonder if it would somehow be possible to have some sort of watch party with the Canadian players of the women's team for Canada's one or all of Canada's games at the World Cup. I don't know, that's probably something you probably got to clear that with the coach and the AD and the conference and the NCAA and all sorts of mess. And that's not my job to figure out. That's just one idea that I have. I don't know what ideas you out there in listener land have, but the men's program, the men's team is also has a very international flavor. Just last year, I think they had at least 4 guys from Cyprus, and I don't know that Cyprus is going to be at the 2026 World Cup, but UEFA qualifying I don't think has even started yet, which is crazy. The tournament's like a year away, but they've got to do something, or at least I hope that they do something. Everybody's got to do something, but with it being a college team, I don't know if it's really an apples to apples comparison, but I would like to see them do something, and I would like to see the city reward them if they did, if that makes sense. One thing that I think they should try to use the World Cup to maybe get them over the hump on is the stadium project. No, this is not blowing up the Mid-South Coliseum to put a 7,500 seat USL stadium. RIP that dream. And that's still, I think, the best article I've ever written in my life was the interview that I had with Craig Unger. That was a very good piece over at World Soccer Talk. But no, this is the Liza Welford Stadium project over at the University of Memphis. They announced it right at the start of the spring season, right at the start of the regular season this past August. And they, from what I have heard, are very, 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 very close to getting everything that they need to do it all at once. It sounds like that they have enough to start doing it in stages, but they want to have the full amount of what they need so they can just do the whole thing at once and not have to do it in stages, which makes sense to me because if you start doing something in stages, you get halfway done and the rest of it never gets done. So I like the idea of them wanting to do it all at once. And I think there are maybe plans for like a media tour blitz to try to drum up a little bit of extra support. I would also just point out that the president of U.S. Soccer is from Memphis and, played for the U.S. women's national team. And this is a project that is really being driven by the women's soccer program at the University of Memphis. And not that I think the federation would give them any money, but they could perhaps, hey, this is the University of Memphis women's soccer team. You're from Memphis. You're the president of U.S. Soccer. Would you be able to point us in the direction of somebody who might be able to cut us a check to get us over the finish line with this? But if that doesn't necessarily get done in the very near future, I do wonder if the World Cup coming here in 2026, if they could somehow figure out a way to get, hey, if you enjoyed watching the World Cup, we've got successful programs over here at the University of Memphis, and we're trying to get this money to finish redoing the stadium and the locker rooms and all of this, and donate today, please. I don't know that it would really take until fall of 26 to get to that goal. I don't know what the goal is. I don't know what the exact numbers are. Nobody handed me bank statements. Nobody gave me a spreadsheet. But I think if more people go to the games for both the women's team and the men's team, and more people are buying concessions, and more people are checking out the YouTube channels, and more people are following them on socials. There's a Liza's Light Facebook page, which I would encourage everybody to go like and subscribe to. I think if they can get all of that, if they can get more support, then there's more people obviously that are going to be able to see that they're trying to get the stadium project done and are going to be more willing to donate more money to get them over the finish line. So I think that's going to do it for us tonight. That was just, it's a long off season and we don't have Memphis 901 FC to cover anymore. So I didn't want everybody to forget that I don't want people thinking that the 901 Soccer Podcast is gone forever because 901 FC is gone forever. That nothing could be farther from the truth. Going to be over the summer. We've got the Club World Cup here in the U.S. U.S. men's national team is playing in Nashville. 3 Club World Cup games are in Nashville. Hoping to be there for all 4 of those games. That's all still up in the air right now. We're waiting to hear back. But hopefully Bluff City Media will have a presence at a U.S. men's national team game and the Club World Cup. So We'll grow the brand that way. And then once the Tigers start back up in the fall, I think what I'm planning on doing, and granted, this is April, things can change in the next 4 months, but what I'm planning on doing is covering as many of the games as I can. And now that there's no 901C, I feel like I'll be able to cover more than I had. And doing the post-game write-ups like I normally do, and then probably once a week recording a show, just kind of recapping what's happened since the last show we've done. I know the way that we did it for 901FC was to just record after every home game, but I wasn't the one writing the post-game recap. I did the preview. I don't think I'm going to do written previews for the Tigers. I think I will do a written recap and then do a weekly podcast. And I'm toying around with the idea of trying to have players and coaches on, or other media members, or I don't know. But what there will be much more Tiger soccer coverage this year than there has been in the past. I think on this show we've only had one Tiger specific episode. We've had, I think we'll call it two. But hopefully, if I'm able to do more people are able to see that, and go to games, follow them on socials, check out their YouTube page, donate money for the stadium, all that good stuff. But hopefully going to be a busy summer here for the 901 Soccer Podcast and Bluff City Media. And then when we get into Tiger Soccer in the fall, we'll really get rolling. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm your host, Lawrence Dockery. You can find me on Twitter at LDoc93, 901 Soccer Podcast on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod, Bluff City Media on Twitter at BluffCity_media, 901 Soccer on Facebook, Bluff City Media on Facebook, and, of course, right here on YouTube. Like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the Bluff City Media channel, and we will talk to you next time.